So the main thing is, why am I here? What is it that I'm trying to do by coming to conferences, by talking to conferences, and just generally throughout my life? It's self-improvement. And what I mean by that is, if I'm giving a talk about developers and about tools, then I wanted to get this out of the way at the start. Don't feel compelled to laugh. I felt that I couldn't do this presentation without making that joke, so I just want to get it out in the open now. We can forget it ever happened, and we can all move on. OK, but mainly, the thing is, I consider myself an OK developer. I think I'm kind of good enough to recognize when I'm making horrible mistakes. But I feel like I've had the privilege of working with a bunch of really smart people and observing a bunch of things that they've done in various situations, things that I've learned, little practices, tools, tips, all of these kind of things. So what I'd like to do is talk you through some of these things. Now, this is our sad average developer. He's sad for a number of reasons. Someone has chopped off his genitals and replaced them with smooth plastic. He also looks a bit like Kristen Stewart as well. Good abs, though. But aside from that, what we want to do is we want to try and improve our developer. Now, traditionally, if we want to get better living things like developers, then what we do is we take a male developer and a female developer who love each other very much, and we put them together, and we create new baby developers. However, you guys are Symfony developers, so you're aware that inheritance is bad. So we're not going to do that. We're not going to try and create new developers by inheriting from old ones. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to take a kind of Frankenstein composition approach, and we're going to take our current developer, and we're going to chop and change, and we're going to replace them with things that I like from various locations. So before we start off, though, throughout this entire talk, I think I'm going to do a kind of schizophrenic flip-flopping back and forth between telling you something and then kind of telling you the complete opposite as well. So I'm not here to come out and bash everyone and say, actually, we're all terrible at our jobs and we need to spend all of our time improving. A lot of the time, it's not about changing everything we do. I mean, it can just be about taking away some of the things that we're doing wrong. The other thing, I'm going to stop using the clicker because it's not making this work well. OK. The other thing is, I'm going to throw in a whole load of random pop culture references. Please do feel free to just shout out if you recognize what's happening at any point. So the first point I'd like to make is that I'm not advocating that everybody needs to be a superhero in this situation. So there's no need for you to believe that you have to go out and save the world by being a developer that can change other people's lives and create some kind of revolutionary new product. It's not going to work. You're not going to be the best at everything. If coming along to a conference like this teaches me anything, most of the time I spend the morning watching a bunch of talks and thinking to myself, oh my God, I'm an idiot, and these people are a lot smarter than me. So you don't need to try and be the absolute best. And if that is your goal, to be better than everyone at everything, then you're going to burn out trying to do it. And if you do that in a work setting as well, you're also going to become the person that everybody hates, not because you're saving the world, but because you think you're saving the world and you're actually creating a complete disaster, and everybody's having to go around cleaning up after you and dealing with it when you have a mental breakdown and stripped down in the middle of the office. OK. So what I'd like to do now is take you through the individual bits and pieces. And this is a kind of collection of anecdotes of things I've picked up along the way. And we're going to replace various body parts with things that are going to help us do our jobs a bit better. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about editors. And before I get into that, what I want to say about professional tools is that a professional tool is not a consumer application. So when we talk about the applications that we're building for the users, that's when we use ideas like the don't make me think, the idea about things being immediately intuitive, about being able to discover something in the minimum number of clicks. That's not necessarily the same thing as a tool being very efficient at what it does. Sometimes the usability and the simplicity of an application means that you can actually take away flexibility and power, that if you're very skilled at what you're doing, then you can take advantage of that flexibility and power to be more efficient than if you were simply using something that was easy to learn. What we've done is we've replaced the hand, and that is a gloved hand that happens to have 6 fingers on it. Anyone know about someone with 6 fingers? 6 fingers. Ah, yes. Oh, man, okay, you guys need to go and watch The Princess Bride, okay? So there's a character in this called Count Rugen, who has 6 fingers on his right hand. The reason for this is because he's an Emacs user. And to enter a number of keyboard shortcuts in Emacs, you essentially need not only 6 fingers, but you have to use your nose as well for some of them. But this is the thing. He is very efficient at using Emacs because of this additional finger. So what I wanted to do is give you a little precis until I get into my favorite black box. Who knows Neil Stephenson? Not personally, but has read material by him. Okay, God, this is going to be a real education for you guys, okay? Neil Stephenson is a science fiction author. One of the reasons I like his books is that they're almost like taking a university course in whatever subject happens to be around the subject of the book. But he's also written a number of essays as well. And one of the ones, he talks about a summer job that he had when he was a lot younger working on a construction site. And they had this drill called the hole hog. And basically what it was a box that has a hole in one side where you're able to stick like a standard piece of metal or something to secure it. And it has a chuck on the other side for sticking your drill bit into. And then it has a button to make it go. And that's it. The thing about the hole hog, though, is, you put that drill bit in front of anything, and it will drill through it. You push the button down, the drill will stop. It will not stop until you undo the button. And he was saying there were numerous accidents that people wouldn't secure the drill properly, and then would put it into something that was too hard to drill, but the drill would start going through it anyway, then it would get stuck and it would break someone's arm because it would throw them around as it started rotating. The point was that with this tool like this, what he's saying here is, and I'll put these slides up afterwards with the references, I would definitely recommend going and reading the whole essay, but I kind of wanted to highlight this bit. He never blamed himself for any of the accidents that he had with the hole hog, because it's an extremely powerful tool, and it's dangerous to use if you don't know what you're doing. And as developers, you can probably start relating to the second bit, where he actually started looking down on people who just were, foolish enough to go and use a drill that they just bought from a shop. Because, seriously, if you want to drill a hole, then obviously you need the risk of killing yourself at the same time. So what I wanted to talk about is my favorite black box, which is Vim. And what I kind of wanted to say about things being difficult to use, that doesn't mean that learning them can be fun and rewarding. So Vim, if you want to get into Vim, Vim is kind of only eclipsed by ed in terms of being difficult to use as a Unix utility. You load it up and you're pretty much just presented with a black screen. That's it. And then it's kind of like, well, that's the most efficient thing. I'm not going to burden you with extra stuff on the screen that just distracts you from writing code. That's for people who like bright colors and fun buttons and so on. However, Vim does include Vim Tutor built into it. I'm hard-pressed to think of anything that could be more fun than being on the command line. So this is a really ideal way to learn about Vim. So you fire this up, and it just takes you straight in to basically a course that you can read and you can navigate as you learn the Vim commands. So the first line there teaches you about how to move around in the file. You can carry on moving around through it. You'll do various edits, and you'll save the file, and as you go, you'll learn all about Vim and how to use it efficiently. Now, maybe it was just the fact that we've had a really tasty lunch and you guys are a bit full and a bit tired, but I'm not sensing that this is massively exciting to you. But wait, there's more. If the command line is not yet your thing and you want a sort of gateway drug to ease you into it, you can go to vimadventures.com. Now, Vim Adventures is basically a top-down RPG that you control by using Vim commands. So here, you play the little protagonist, you navigate by using the Vim keys, and as you go around, you get to power up by basically using the keys to collect other commands. And the commands allow you to do things like delete characters or motion commands so that you can jump a word at a time to get past obstacles and so on. I think this might be the first time I've spent money on the internet. I bought this. This is amazing. So this is a really good way to kind of demonstrate that, your IDE is probably the thing that you are going to spend the most time interacting with. You should never be spending time in your job when you're trying to complete a task wondering how to do it in your IDE, or wondering if the extra RAM that you ordered for Eclipse is turned up yet. If your IDE is slowing you down in some way, it's either because the IDE is wrong or because your skills with the IDE are not reflexive enough that it has simply become part of the way that you work. So it may be hard to learn, but that doesn't, just because it's hard to learn doesn't mean it's the wrong thing to do. Sometimes you need to put in that investment into the tool to make sure that you can use it to its full extent. Okay. The next thing I'd like to talk about, and the next two body parts that we're going to use, are actually, I'm going to say I learned this from Marcelo, who was presenting previously, who is our training manager. In a way, I've maybe just stolen these ideas from him as well. But he learned them from other people before me. Now, the idea of deliberate practice, then, we're going to drop this arm in. Anyone know this arm? Kill Bill. OK. So this is from the main character's arm, Uma Thurman, in Kill Bill. And one of the scenes in one of the Kill Bill films is she's busy doing her training montage as she learns Kung Fu. And what she has to do is basically stand in front of a board like this with her hand against the board, and she just has to punch the board repeatedly. That's all she does. She just continues to punch this board until basically she can punch through the board from this very short distance. Later on in the film, it allows her to punch clean through a plot hole so that she can escape and move on to the next scene. But the point of this is that there are some times when it's not about going out there and solving the hardest problem that you can. You don't immediately jump in and say, OK, I want to learn Symfony, therefore I'm just going to pick I'm going to build the next Facebook. Do something. You don't go in like that. But what deliberate practice says is that alongside learning something for the first time, it's also about, much like we talked about with the editor, continually repeating those simple motions until they become things that you can just do reflexively. So when someone is asking you about the kind of use of the SPL classes in PHP would be a good example. Learning about those classes so that that knowledge is just kind of in your head for when you need to use it at a particular time. You're not having to spend additional time going and looking these things up or thinking too much about the basics. So one of the ways that you can go about doing this is by, I'm trying to think about how to say this without using the term ninja. But what we're going to do is we're going to borrow some ideas from martial arts, basically the KATA. So the KATA is like with the Kill Bill thing, it's about repeating a particular movement or set of movements until you can do those instinctively. So in karate, it might be a series of a couple punches and a couple kicks that you can do. And once you have those forms down, you're able to bring them out and then improvise on them and extend your skills. Now, one of the ways that you can do that with code is these two guys, Dave Thomas and Roy Osherove, came up with the idea of the code kata. And the code kata is basically small, simple coding exercises that can take anywhere from about 5 minutes to half an hour that you can do by yourself. At work, one of the things that we do every so often is that we actually do them as a group. So we'll sit down and either pair program or get in small groups to solve them. And I just thought I'd show you an example of one of them. And this is something that if you want to go through the slides later and give this a try for yourself, it can be quite a fun exercise. It's basically, this is the TDD kata, so the problem is almost trivially simple. The idea here is to get you into the habit of doing the test red-green refactor process so that you've actually got that kind of setup and that workflow going for you. So what happens here is it's very simple. We're just going to create a method that can take nothing, or can take one number, or can take two numbers in a string, and we're going to just return them added up. So it's literally that simple, but the purpose of the exercise is that you keep it very strict on yourself. You write the test for the simplest case, which is accepting nothing and returning nothing. You slowly build that up, you build up your tests. When you've done that, you delete it, and then the next day you come back and you do the same thing again. Now, the idea of this is that, again, it's just getting these things into your head. So when you actually want to come and write a test for a piece of work, you already know how to write tests, you already know the tools you want to use, you know how to run them, you know how to report on them, you just dive straight in and start going. One of the things I wanted to show you here that can be quite fun to make this an exercise with more kind of immediate feedback and gratification is I set this up for an exercise that I did a while ago, which was this little script that, if you guys can see this too well, but if you're on Linux, there's the set of iNotify commands that you can use that basically will sit there and watch for changes in files. So what I've got here is just a script that watches for any files in the directory, and if they change, it runs the tests. So what I'm able to do is have two terminals, one with my tests running and one with my code, and every time I save something in my editor over here, it reruns the tests, and I can happily watch things go from red to green as I fix and refactor them. Before we move on, some other options for this as well. There's Project Euler out there. Euler, I've never been sure. But those are like a series of maths problems that you can go through. And one of the challenges with those is, again, to solve the problem, then come back and solve it again the next day, but sometimes challenge yourself. If you've solved the problem to the best of your ability the first time, then the next day come back and try and solve it using a different method. So do something to put yourself slightly out of your comfort zone. So mastering your craft. This is kind of the next section, so hopefully, anyone? Yoda, yes, okay. So we're gonna master our craft. Now, what I want to talk about here is less how you're gonna master the craft, but recognizing and defining what mastering your craft actually means. So one of the things that Marcelo's helped us use inside of Invika to rate our own skills is called the Dreyfus model of skill acquisition. So that takes you through these 5 different levels. So novice is kind of, you are aware of a concept that exists. So you guys are all novices in watching The Princess Bride now, because I've alerted you to the fact that this film exists and you know that you need to go and watch it, but you haven't watched it yet. Beginner is then someone who has had some experience in something. So they've maybe done a tutorial, they've maybe watched the film once, and they would be comfortable to go back and do it again, but they would need to sit there with the documentation, they would need to be instructed. Competent is actually this kind of large sweet spot where most of us will exist for the skills that we find important in our day-to-day jobs. Competent is that you can go and do these things, They come relatively easy to you. You can make reasoned decisions about the compromises that you're making. But you still need guidance. You still refer to things. Now, the area that you want to generally try and aspire to is proficient. Proficient is where you're not only just these things come naturally, but you can make much more balanced decisions. You know when is the correct time to deviate from what the documentation says. You know when the correct time to do something that is actually more performant. You're also very good at teaching those concepts to other people. And that's where the final level comes in. Expert. Expert is when you say guru or even wizard, that's kind of the level that these people exist at. Expert is you do all of these things, and to everyone else it simply seems like magic. The reason experts aren't always so great inside of a company setting is that experts have difficulty passing these concepts on to other people because they always just jump immediately to the solution since it's obvious to them, which means that if you pair an expert with a novice or a beginner, it's going to be very difficult for them to actually learn what they're doing because all they're seeing is the finished product. They never really get an explanation of the process. One of the things that's also kind of similar to this is called the 7 stages of expertise in software engineering. The link is underneath that as well. And again, this works in a very similar way. It shows you some of these different areas. Now, I'm not going to go through these steps. The thing I found interesting about this is they also graphed it. Now, again, this is one of those stages where I've decided to use red on a black background. I've given this presentation enough times to know this is a bad idea, so I'm going to guide you through this again. Now, what happens here is we've got productivity up this axis, and we've got the stage that you're at along this axis. And what we're doing is we're kind of tracking the productivity as you go through those initial stages. As you initially learn about something, your productivity is at a low level but relatively stable. When you actually start to get some initial understanding about the topic, your productivity actually dips initially. This tends to be the situation where people get a bit paralyzed by all the new information that they've been given. So this is the stage where, rather than just creating code and getting it out there, they suddenly start analyzing their code and looking at it and going, oh my God, we've been doing this all wrong. We can't ship this. So actually things slow down a little bit until people get more confident about what they're doing. At this point, productivity ramps right up again and goes up really quite significantly until you get to that final stage again. And the final stage is this kind of guru level where people, again, reach that point where, and I suspect you have probably met a few of these people, where they care less about the outcome of what their code is doing and care more about advancing the concept of that code. So once you get up there, these are the people who are creating the tools, who are doing the research, who are breaking new ground, but they're not the people that you necessarily come to when you have a project that you need to get out the door and you need to make work. Okay. I'm not going to remove anything here, but I'm just going to take a brief diversion. On that previous slide, I showed a graph that didn't have any units and only had measurements up one axis as well. So it's not even a graph, really. It was just a couple of lines on the screen that I talked about. Now, the point is, we're engineers. If we're going to improve ourselves, we want to be able to measure that in some way. Otherwise, we can't prove that anything actually changed. The problem with measuring people is that we generally try and measure the wrong sort of thing. And on top of that, when you measure people as well, people can be divided. Like if we went down the middle of the room here, whenever I'm in a situation where I'm trying to measure people, I tend to think that they fall into a kind of 50-50 category of either deliberately evil or just stupid. I'll let you guys decide which way round you are on that one. But the point is, if you measure people, they will do their best to screw with your metrics, either subconsciously or consciously. The examples of this, and the lesson that I want you to kind of take here is metrics are to achieve a goal. A metric by itself is just a measurement. It doesn't mean anything. So you need to be very careful about the goals that you attach to metrics. The examples that we've got, I was told about a company that had KPIs for the department and for the developers, so key performance indicators. One of those was code coverage. Who measures code coverage? Okay. So they had some existing code and legacy platform, and they wanted to get code coverage up and keep it at a certain level. So what they did was they put code coverage in as a KPI, which was linked to developers' bonuses. The effect that this actually had was that developers made sure code coverage never went down. They did not make sure that the code was good. They did not make sure that the tests were valid. They did not make, the other thing they would do is they would deliberately avoid touching older legacy code or difficult problems, because if it was difficult to test, then that was their bonus on the line. So that simple thing of saying, I mean, that's a good goal. You know, we want high code coverage. We want to be able to say that we're testing all of our code. But link it to money and link it to how you measure people, and they deliberately start trying to screw it up for you. The other one, of course, is stack ranking. Who's heard of stack ranking? Okay, this has kind of been a popular thing that came up like with how Microsoft measured their employees as well, and a couple other companies. Basically what you do is you take all of your employees and you kind of rank them, and then depending on how critical you're feeling, you just fire the bottom 30%. That's it. Or if you're in a slightly nicer company, you put them on some kind of performance review. Again, if you think about this in a purely objective sense, I've got a group of peers, we compare ourselves to each other, I realize that I need to improve compared to employee 537, and I think, okay, well, I better do some training in this area. What stack ranking actually does to a group of people is it introduces the mentality where there's two of you, and a wild bear appears, and the bear starts running. So what you do is you stop, you calmly sit down, you lace your shoes up tightly, you do a few warm-up exercises, kick your friend in the leg, and they say, well, what are you doing? We need to outrun this bear. And you say, no, I just need to outrun you. So I'm not entirely sure you guys got that, because if you outrun them, the bear eats them, and you get away. So that's the problem with stack ranking, is it becomes less about everyone wanting to improve the company. It just becomes about making sure you're not in the bottom 30%. Some of the stories from inside Microsoft that I was reading about this was that it actually meant that people would deliberately withhold information. Like if they felt they had something valuable that would contribute to their stack ranking, they wouldn't share it with someone else, because that might turn them into a threat, you know, especially if you're near that bottom level. Oh, wow, 10 minutes left. Time management is one that I need to work on. Okay, T-shaped people. We're going to run through these reasonably quickly. Now, who recognizes the legs? Yeah, so it's Chell from Portal. Now, Valve, who made this game, conveniently had their employee handbook leaked on the internet, or it may have just been a clever move on their part. Now, what they do is, in their employee handbook, which is this kind of beautifully created document, it's well worth having a read through. They do some very cool stuff. T-shaped people is the idea that you have a broad, shallow range of skills, but you have one area that you deep dive on, and that becomes the area that you specialize in. So from our point of view, this means kind of, if you're a developer, get some experience of what project managers do, get some experience of what quality assurance people do, find out about those areas so that you've got a better understanding so that you can best serve those areas, and likewise, they get an understanding of what it is you do as a developer and can help you do your job more efficiently. Okay, right, we've got 10 minutes to cover some C code then. We can do this. Okay, if you're in a group of people and it's a company, and you feel that you are the smartest person in the room, it means it's unlikely that you're learning anything. Maybe this means that you are just working in a company full of infants, and it's time to move on, or maybe you're deluding yourself. Anyway, one of the people who might be able to actually claim that from an objective point of view is John Carmack from id Software. Now, they released the Quake 3 source code and made that totally open source. And what happened was some people looked inside of it and found this. Now, this is a function called the fast square root function. And what it does is, as the name implies, it computes square roots of numbers. This is important in 3D graphics because square roots help you find the normals of things to do like reflection and light bouncing and blah, blah, blah. Now, what's happening inside of here, I'll give you a rough overview because I don't really understand it. If you want to read the code afterwards and see if you can work through it, basically we get a number in, we assign a couple, so we have like a kind of pointer to a reference maybe. Then we have this weird hexadecimal constant over here that literally has the comment from the code, what the fuck. And then we multiply y by 3/2 by x2 by y. That's the first iteration. The second iteration is commented out, and then we return y. Now, so the issue is, it's kind of like, oh wow, there's some like amazing voodoo going on in there. John Carmack is truly a genius. So a friend of mine runs a 3D graphics forum, and they were talking about this. So he thought, you know what, I will just email John Carmack and see what happens. So he emailed it thinking, you know, we're never going to hear anything back. A while later, he gets this email back from John Carmack. There's basically like this long thread of John saying, oh, I'm flattered that you think this is really good, but I didn't write it. I actually cribbed it from this guy that we used to work with, this Finnish guy. So I forwarded the email on to him to see where he came up with it. And this guy had forwarded on to someone else saying, oh, actually, I got this code from someone who I used to work with at NVIDIA. I did this. The guy from NVIDIA was kind of like, yeah, I'm not really sure. Let's around the department, see if we can find anything. And it's like, so eventually they traced it back to, like, it had sort of appeared in one form in a SIGGRAPH paper somewhere. So it's like, even John Carmack is cribbing other people's code that he does not understand. But you know, it works and it's fast, so we're going to put it in there. So the point is, there's another story then, still related to id, as we throw one of the demons in there. This guy called Brian Hook went to work for id, and he went there with this idea that he was going to change things. He knew he was hot shit, and he was going to join this company, and everyone was going to be like, oh, you are... I mean, we haven't really done anything, just like Doom and so on. You're like some kind of hacker god. And he got there and he realized that he ended up, you know, working overtime, like working late into the night, coming in the morning, and he still couldn't keep up with these guys. He was getting himself into loads of problems because he was overcommitting. He was tired, his personal life was suffering. So eventually he did this thing where he just accepted that he was never going to be as good as John Carmack and some of the other guys there, and suddenly found that things were going a lot better. He was committing to stuff that he could actually achieve, and he was doing it. And it wasn't that he was an idiot, it was just he was setting unrealistic goals. Okay, so one of those things then is about adjusting your attitude. This could be a little tricky. Anyone? This is the sweater from The Big Lebowski. So the dude abides. Okay, the idea here is that don't confuse being passionate and authoritative about your topic with just being an angry asshole. Now, I've probably worked on a couple open source projects. You going to shoot me again, Barney? Or? Cool, okay, right. Now, this is taken from a mailing list of a minor open source project. People here may have used it at some point. I'll just throw a few choice quotes up there. This is all taken from one message. Yeah, this is some code review feedback about a patch that was merged. Mauro's kind of getting some flack for this. Ooh, and then they're going to take it away. They starred out that last one because that's a rude word. So this is the thing. I mean, and Linus has got a lot of flack for this. I mean, this is funny when he's directing it at people like NVIDIA, when it's a big faceless corporation and he's going off on them. That's fine. You know, no one's really suffering. NVIDIA can go and weep into their money about it later. But what he's doing here is, I mean, This guy just merged a patch into the kernel. It's not like it even got into production or broke anything, but Linus saw it when he was reviewing some stuff and just went off on this tirade. And this is not the only time that this has happened. This has come up again recently, and Linus was defending it by saying it was like his culture, which is odd, because I mean, I've worked with quite a few Finnish people, and I mean, they're weird, but they're not all like this. And he likened it to this kind of management by perkeli, which was kind of more like drill instructor style feedback for people. Now, the point I'm trying to make here is that, especially in an open source project, if a colleague came and gave me feedback like that from a code review that I had submitted, then I think it's the kind of thing where you'd feel justified peeing in their coffee afterwards. And I didn't think I would feel any guilt about that. Now, this is a blog from Elizabeth Naramore, who works at GitHub. And she was stating this about kind of open source projects and comparing it to this sort of dingy grocery store near where she lives. And it's not that she has anything specifically against it. They've never done anything specifically to offend or hurt her. She just doesn't feel comfortable going there, so she doesn't go. So that's kind of the point. With that kind of attitude on a project or in a work environment, then you're going to lose people. People you never even knew that you could have helping you out. They're just not going to bother turning up because you were a dick. However, I'm not saying that what that means is that you need to turn into this kind of neutral, humorless blob who never offends anyone, who never speaks up and never stands up for what they believe in. So what I needed was someone who could speak out and be heard. So I've got this beard here. I've never been able to really grow a beard, so I kind of live vicariously through others. I've used Linux for a long time, so I can grow this, but not a proper beard. Anyone guess the beard? Yes, it's Brian Blessed. Because if we need someone who's going to be heard, and yet I can't imagine anyone ever being offended by Brian Blessed, though. But there's certainly no chance that you're going to miss him. So that's what I really want to stress here. It doesn't mean that you have to give up your principles. You can still believe strongly in things, but what you should be doing is focus on attacking the ideas. Don't make attacks personal. If the code is bad, then talk about the code, but it is not about blaming the other person or attacking them on a personal level. It also means that if you have a problem, then talk about it quickly. When it comes up, deliver that news as soon as you know about it, especially if you're in a position where you manage other people. Because the last thing that they want to find in a performance review is that you drag out something from January when their review is in December. And you're kind of like, yeah, I saw this 12 months ago and I've kind of been sitting on it so I can have a go at you now. That's not going to get you respect. If you're on the other side, and in fact, if you're on the management side as well, learn to say no. The final one, don't be afraid to ask questions. The previous place I worked, we called them DFQs. That was our official term for them, just to make it very clear that you shouldn't feel bad about asking these dumb questions. And finally, join in. Be part of the community. We've got the arm here from Iron Man. The reason that I say join the community is because, as you've no doubt noticed, that's the armor from Avengers, not from any of the previous films. So the point is, you can be a superhero, but be a superhero as part of a team. And there are a number of ways that you can do that. All of these bits and pieces. We ran a test fest up north. If anyone wants to know about how to do that for PHP, then come talk to me at some point. And of course, write code and contribute that. And finally, just enjoy what you do. So there's a smile from someone who you might recognize. It's not a 9 till 5 job. You guys are here right now. This is more than is required than if you were just punching in and out. So that's it. We've built our improved developer. Could this be you? If it is, we're hiring. Thank you.